We'll wait for the thundering herd to pass. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. God bless you, and Merry Christmas. This is one of the most remarkable passages in the New Testament. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came, and here is a mistranslation in the English, not wise men, magi, a very specific word. It's a Persian word. We'll get into that. There came magi from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who is born King of the Jews? For back in the east is what this means. They didn't see a star that was east of them. They were in the east, and they saw this star west of them. Back in the east, we have seen his star and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, so this was a big deal. When these magi showed up from as far away as they had been, asking the question they asked, the entire city of Jerusalem was surprised and astounded. He gathers all the scribes and the chief priests and the people together and demanded, before a crowd of people, demanded of these priests and scribes where the Messiah, or in Greek, Christ, should be born. And the priests and scribes, see, Herod is not even a Jew. Herod doesn't know anything about the Jewish scriptures. He was appointed king over Israel, or over Judea, by Caesar Augustus. Herod himself is an Edomite. He doesn't know anything about the scriptures. He asks the Jewish scholars in Jerusalem where the Messiah should be born. And they said unto him, reading from Micah chapter 5, when the Messiah comes, he'll be born in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet Micah, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee, Bethlehem, shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privately called this group of magi, inquired of them diligently, exactly what time did they see that star? When did that, you say you saw a star. When? Now, we don't have them answering, but they must have answered. About 2 years ago, they saw it. Because he sent them to Bethlehem and said, well, then go and search diligently for the young child. And when you've found him, bring me word again, that I may come also and worship him. When they had heard the king, these magi departed, and lo, the star which they had seen back in the east reappears to them. And it goes before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceeding with great joy. So they must not have been seeing that star throughout all of their journey. They had seen a star back in Persia and had taken off on this long trip. Long way. And now they see it again, and somehow it guides them to the very house. And yes, it was a house, no longer the stable. This child's about 2 years old now. They're in a house. When they were come into the house, they saw the, not baby, but young child. And Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. Later we'll find that Herod gets angry and orders that all the boy children 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem should be slain. Now there are a number of questions that come from this familiar story. Let's dispel, first of all, some of the wrong ideas that tradition has given to us. Someone way back when the Bible was being translated into Latin got the word magi mixed up with the word magna. This is magi or magi as we pronounce it. They threw an N in there, magna. Instead of being magi then, in Latin it came over as great ones. Magna, great ones. And from that, from the Latin Bible, we got the wrong idea that these weren't scholars but kings. We have this we three kings business. In Puerto Rico, they don't necessarily, Chella and I lived in Puerto Rico for some years. We built a church there. It's still there. But in Puerto Rico, they don't give the children gifts on Christmas Day. They wait until January the 6th, and it's not Santa Claus that comes to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico ain't on Santa Claus' list. On January 6th, the kids don't get up and look under a Christmas tree. They get up and look under their beds. Because los tres reyes vinieron. The three kings came. They believe that the three kings show up on January 6th and put gifts under children's beds. Very different from any other Spanish tradition. Only Puerto Rico does that. And they have parades that day. And there'll always be three guys dressed up with crowns, and they'll be on their fine horses leading the parade with horses that do that paso fino step that you'll only find also in Spain and Puerto Rico. Especially trained horses. And they celebrate, and all the children shout, Los tres reyes, los tres reyes, the three kings. And of course, when I was a kid, we learned of the Christmas carols, you know. We used to do to it what we, on the playground, what we did to many songs. We would corrupt it. We three kings of Orient are tried to smoke a rubber cigar. It was loaded and exploded. We two kings of Orient, and it would go on down. And on Christmas cards, we see these three kings, and their names developed in the tradition that they came from the three great continents. One from out in Persia or Babylon, his name is Belshazzar. And then one from Africa. It's often depicted on your Christmas cards being a dark-skinned man representing the African peoples. And his name is Melchior. And then another one from the West, perhaps Greece. And his name is Caspar. And we were taught as children The Catholic Church, there's even a feast where you pray to saints. They became saints in the Catholic canon. And St. Belshazzar, St. Melchior, and St. Caspar honored on those days. Am I making any sense to anyone? You thought Caspar was just a friendly ghost, didn't you? It's funny how long traditions can develop. And what I like to do is get right back to the core of this thing. Persia had long been a nation whose official religion was Zoroastrianism. Hundreds of years before, Cyrus the Great, the emperor of Persia, was a Zoroastrian. What is that? Well, there had been a prophet in Persia named Zoroaster. Of course, that's the Greek pronunciation. His name was really Zarathustra. But he had taught the Persian nobility, there is only one God. There are not many gods like the Babylonians do. You know, if you leave Israel, then you cross the Jordan, you go through a big region called the Transjordan, and then you come to Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq. And if you cross all of that, you get way over between Iraq and Afghanistan. There's this large country now called Iran. Back then it was called Persia. Long distance, by the way, from Jerusalem in Judea all the way out across those nations to Tehran, Persia. Very far distance. Anyway, Zoroaster taught the kings of Persia back in those days, there are not many gods the way the Babylonians think. There's only one God. And He created everything. The sun is not a god, the moon is not a god. Those are just things made by the one God. What's His name? Well, in speaking that ancient Persian language, he explained, this God really has no name. We can only describe Him as Ahura Mazda, which means the self-existent one. Very much in that language what the word Jehovah means over here in Israel, the self-existent one. Now, we do not know where Zoroaster got his idea or information. But they formed a great religion there in worship of the one God, and the priests of that religion became known as Magi. Or actually, that was the Persian word for priest. Magi. Persia was the only country that had Magi. And the Magi were scholars. It may be that some Israelite prophet hundreds of years earlier had met this fellow, Zoroaster. But Israel and Persia thus were the only two nations on earth that were monotheistic, that believed there's only one God. All of the other nations around them and among them at that time believed in polytheism, a whole pantheon of different gods, you know. Am I making sense to anyone? What is remarkable is that not all the way out in Persia, but just in Mesopotamia, or Babylon, the Babylonian king, there was a fellow named Daniel. And the Persians conquered the Babylonians one night when Daniel was an elder man. And the great Cyrus the Great, the emperor, placed a subaltern king to rule over his newly conquered Babylon. And this subaltern was named Darius. And Darius met this fellow Daniel in Babylon. Now, Darius was not Babylonian, he was from Persia. He comes in now to rule in responsibility to Cyrus the Great. The Bible tells us that he really liked this fellow Daniel and admired him much. But there were other officials around the city of Babylon that were jealous of Daniel. And they began to spread rumors about him. They tricked Darius into signing a law saying that no one should worship any god. And once he signed that, because Darius, being a Zoroastrian, didn't think he wanted these Babylonian people to stop worshiping all the gods they worship and worship only one God. Am I making sense? He was wanting to put an end to all. Well, Daniel was praying to the one God, which is probably the same as the one God that the Persians conceived of in their religion. Except Daniel wasn't calling him Ahura Mazda. He was calling him Yahweh or Jehovah or however it was pronounced. Since Darius had signed their bill that nobody should be praying to other gods, they were able now to come and say, this Daniel is praying to another God, not the one you worship, Darius. And the law says he's to be thrown to the lions for that. Darius was very sorrowful about it. But he had made a law and now had to stick with it. And as Daniel was being lowered down into this crevice where these lions were kept, Darius said to him, may your God be with you. There was an understanding between these two men that maybe the one God that Daniel worshiped and the one God that Darius and Cyrus worshiped were probably one and the same in essence. And so Darius was also praying to his concept of the one God, that Daniel would be spared. While Daniel also prayed the thing. And you know the story. Daniel was lowered down there and left, and the lions with their swishing tails and their shaking manes glided past him, looked at him with their green eyes, and settled down on their paws and regarded him. Daniel stood there regarding God. And the lions closed their eyes and slept. Daniel spent all night there before the morning came. Darius, who had not slept all night, knowing that he had been tricked over this question of religion, that the polytheists had wanted to put the two monotheists at odds with one another and had beguiled him into signing this crazy law. Darius was up all night praying to his God, the unseen one, the self-existent one. And he decides to go down there, wherever that den of lions was, and call. It's quite remarkable. Look at him calling down into the darkness. All common sense could tell him Daniel is dead, torn in pieces. But something deeper than common sense told him to call out to Daniel by name. Oh, Daniel, is the God you serve able to deliver you from the mouth of the lions? And out of that cavern came a voice, not a worried voice, not a sick voice, not the voice of an injured person or one harried by trouble all night, but of confident, strong, even happy voice came up from among those monstrous beasts. And it said, "Oh, King Darius, live forever, and know that the God I serve is He who is able to deliver me from the lions." Darius ordered the rope ladder, or whatever mechanism it would have been, down there, and Daniel climbed up. An old man. It is reckoned that Daniel is in his late 80s. And he climbs up out of there, and hands helping him. And as the light comes, there people are curious. They're looking. Sure enough, there are those lions swishing around among one another. And someone says, "Well, you should have left him in there till they got hungry." Those lions just weren't hungry. Darius said, "Well, then you go down there." And he put them down there. And the lions showed that they indeed had been hungry. But Darius was so impressed by Daniel that he sent word back. Here he is in Babylon. He sends word back over to Tehran, Iran, Persia, to Cyrus the Great, saying, "My Lord Emperor, you've got to hear this story." And Cyrus was so impressed when he heard this about this fellow Daniel. He either sent for Daniel. That is one story, that Daniel actually went and stood before Cyrus the Great. And they compared notes on what they thought of the one God. Another story is that Cyrus came to Babylon to meet Daniel. We know that Daniel had a copy of Jeremiah's scriptures. Is this interesting to you? Daniel had written Daniel chapter 9 in the first year of Darius, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of the Lord had come to Jeremiah the prophet. Daniel had Jeremiah's writings there in Babylon. And if he had Jeremiah's writings, he probably had Isaiah's writings also. Isaiah, who had said in Isaiah chapter 9, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, and of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end. Upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." Isaiah had seen this one coming, the birth of one that the world had long awaited. Jeremiah took up that. Daniel, conferring with King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, had said, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, you had a dream. I'll tell you what it means. There is one coming, like a stone cut out of the heavenly mountain and come to earth. And when it hits the earth, it will knock down all the kingdoms of the world. And then that stone will begin to grow higher than any mountain on earth, and it will grow out until it fills all the earth. From the mountain in heaven now comes the same mountain on earth, as in heaven, so on earth." That's exactly what we're supposed to be praying for. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. As God rules in heaven, may Christ rule on earth, for he is the stone cut out of the mountain. Daniel told that to Nebuchadnezzar. He later had his own vision of it and wrote again, "This is a kingdom that will never end. Once it is set up, it will never be destroyed, and it will one day fill all the earth." Who is this one that Isaiah talked about that is coming? Who is this one that Jeremiah mentioned? And now Daniel himself discusses it with kings. Whether Daniel, as a very old man, was carried to Persia to meet Cyrus face to face, or whether Cyrus was so interested that he came to Babylon to meet Daniel, we do not know. But we do know that they conferred. Darius, who had brought Daniel up out of that lion's den and had told the Emperor Cyrus about it, Darius was so impressed that he asked permission of the emperor. I want to send a letter to every city and village in the empire. And that's from Ethiopia to India. That's a lot of cities. Darius said, I'd like for it to be done in every language. There's over 1,000 different languages within the empire that Darius, or that Cyrus has now taken over. Am I making sense to anyone? There are no printing presses, so it's a terrific undertaking. Everything has to be written out and sealed with the king's seal. It has to be written in all these different languages, and then on horseback and camelback, the mail carriers go everywhere in the empire to post this letter that Darius says, I'll pay for all of it. It would come to hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions in our money today. And Cyrus agreed, send that letter out. And what did the letter say? Sent unto all the world. Said, there is no God but the God of Daniel. For only he can save from the den of lions. It was a monotheistic declaration sent into all the world. Nothing like that had ever been done. And apparently it was successful, made its impact all over the empire, for afterwards Cyrus said, you know, I'm going to send out my own letter. And you find this letter in the first chapter of Ezra. We won't turn to it. I read it in Bible class last Sunday afternoon. The letter is in the last chapter of, let me prove it to you, by the way. Just give me a second. It's in the last